You have arrived at Laughbox, the podcast for the Association of Applied and Therapeutic Humor. We are so excited you're here.
In order to really serve your patients, you must be likable.
Welcome to Laughbox, the official podcast of the Association for Applied and Therapeutic Humor. I'm Jim Bob Williams.
And I'm Katie B.
And today we have Dr. Sam Shay, who will be speaking on enhancing healthcare for neurodiverse patients, practical strategies for inclusive care at the conference coming up in May of 2025. Dr. Shay, welcome to the show.
Woo!
Thank you. Happy to be here. You seem to be happier to be here than I am, but I'm flattered. Thank you.
All right. So very quickly, okay, how did you get started in this endeavor?
Which endeavor? The Asperger advocacy, the spectrum advocacy, or the doctor stuff?
All of the above, and the comedy, and everything.
I was going to say, you were born, right? Isn't that where it starts?
We can get as cosmological as you want, I think. Yeah. So I was born, and my parents had it started back, okay, let me put it this way. I got into comedy the usual way, through tragedy. And what happened was that my parents got divorced when I was 6 years old. And it was a nuclear divorce. Both me and all my sisters were caught in the blast radius. And they did not handle it well at all. They were weaponizing the children against the other, back-talking, using the child as a mediary about the issues amongst the child. So the child found themselves like, am I advocating for myself or for the parent? And does the parent actually want what's best for me or what's best to get back at the other parent? And the entire thing was a disaster. And on top of that, during the divorce, this happened when I was age 6. And at age 6 is when I developed all sorts of coping mechanisms. And the coping mechanisms to deal with severe insomnia, I developed an eating disorder. I even had a coffee habit at age 6 because I was so exhausted from the insomnia. And I retreated into video games, television, and sugar. So screen addiction and sugar addiction. At school, I was like I volleyed between the shortest and the second shortest kid in the school and was a very easy target, in part because I had Asperger's syndrome. I didn't know it at the time. No one knew it at the time. I was just not able to read social cues, and I made the mistake of believing the words of children. Hey, oh my God, I'll be your best friend was my kryptonite. Like someone would just tell me, like, oh, they mean it because they said the words coming out of their face. Therefore, they wouldn't lie because I believe people tell the truth, like me. Why would I not believe them? Then why are they making fun of me and hitting me afterwards? After all, I don't understand. And so there was a lot of violence and gaslighting, and I retreated into comedy on television. So I was watching television shows, which I didn't have the words for it then. Like, they were my personal little cultural, anthropological, sociological windows into social dynamics. So I was watching shows, Family Matters. This is obviously before anyone publicly knew any better. I was watching The Cosby Show a lot. And I tried to, like, that seemed to be the most, it's tragic when I say it now, but it's the most wholesome family comedy on there next to Family Matters. And I had enough wherewithal to know Married with Children was a Hieronymus Bosch version of a well put together family. Yeah. And The Simpsons was somewhere like this in between wholesome and in Magneto Bizarro, to borrow a line from Seinfeld. Yeah. Inversion of a family system, of a healthy family system. So I also was watching things like Saturday Night Live, Nick at Night, Saturday morning cartoons. I just watched a lot of TV, and humor and sugar and the transient dopamine rush of winning in a video game were seemingly the only things that I actually found some transient joy in. And I even, at one point, I practically memorized Bill Cosby himself, that 1 hour show that he recorded in the 80s.
Yeah.
I practically memorized it as a child. And because I just watched it over and over and over and over again, because it explained family dynamics. And I also learned the difference in school between a joke and a threat. And this is a little dark, but it's relevant.
Okay.
So the difference between a joke and a threat is the following. If I'm standing there and 3 larger boys come up to me and their leader says something and everyone, including me, laughs, that's a joke. But if the ringleader says something and only they laugh, that's a threat. So I had to learn very quickly at a distance just by observing people's gait, their facial expression, and hearing their inflections if someone was going to hurt me from far away, which became in handy because as a clinician, my ability to detect misaligned signals from their body language from what they're saying or writing became quite acute. And the and I had to learn how to observe in order to preserve. I should probably write that down. That was nice. All right.
It's recorded. We
Yeah,
got it.
thank you. Cool. TM. All right. I had to learn how to observe in order to preserve, which is effectively what comics do.
Yeah.
And being ingrained with comedy from television over and over and over and over again. At some point, I got my hands on some old Bill Cosby tapes where he recorded about his talks about Genesis, Noah. These are brilliant, absolutely brilliant.
Yeah.
Again, monster as a human being, brilliant comedian. And I learned also that if I made people laugh, they were less likely to hurt me. So if you want to talk about humor as a form of masking, there it is. It's just practical. It's just brute force practicality. If I make people laugh, they don't hurt me as much. I knew I was going to be a doctor since I was age 6, just backing up the wheel. But I knew I was going to be a doctor at age 6, in part because both my parents are clinicians. And my grandfather on my father's side was a very famous medical doctor. He was the founding director of the Fels Cancer Research Center at Temple University in 1937. And he continued to do his research there up until his untimely death in 63. He published over 300 articles, research articles, and ranging on nutrition, cancer. He was a gastroenterologist, and he pioneered several research methods. In fact, he was the developer. It's actually called the Shay Rat Prep, which his full name was Dr. Harry Shay, MD, and he developed the Shay Rat Prep because he developed the first reliable chemo-oncogenic murine model for breast cancer, where he figured out a way to poison mice in a very specific, predictable way to develop breast tumors that could be used for research. Now, me as a functional medicine doctor, I'm like, what? But did the poison to make the cancer? Why do you not see how ironic this is? How can we cure cancer? His question is, how do we cure cancer? My question is, why does cancer even come in the first place? And he actually answered that last question. But there's no grant money at the time in the 40s, 50s, and early 60s on prevention. It was all on cure.
Yeah.
And he also developed models on creating reliable duodenal and peptic ulcers for study as well. And he was already doing research for decades. And then Sputnik launched in the 50s. Right. And then suddenly there was money for science.
Yep.
Just poof, magic, money for science. And that's when grant writing became a lot easier for him to do a lot more research. Tragically, he died on the operating table from medical misadventure, because at the time, there was a belief that claudication was, for those that don't know what that means who are listening, this is pain in the legs from walking, was caused by a, quote, reflex arc from an inflamed gallbladder to the heart. When they went in to remove his gallbladder, he died on the table. And the coroner told my father, who was in the beginnings of his medical career, that the coronary artery was so plaqued they couldn't fit a pin through it. And that's how he died.
Wow.
So I never met my grandfather. He died 17 years before I was born. And so there was this entire genealogy of medicine in my family. And effectively, the house I grew up in was like a library with a couple beds and a kitchen. And I knew I was going to be a doctor. And the only thing that kept me going forward, despite the really rough go throughout grade school and high school of the gaslighting and the violence, was getting out and getting away to then pursue medicine. And I actually took a pretty hard left turn into natural medicine when instead of Western medicine, much to the chagrin of my mother. My father was more supportive at the time of me pivoting into natural medicine. And the reason, and I'm not here to talk about the philosophical debate between Western and non-Western medicine, except it's a difference in philosophy on the big picture level. Like Western medicine, to my understanding, was an outgrowth of triage out of World War I. that Western medicine is predicated on emergency care, the philosophy of emergency care. Do you have the symptom? Do you have the pathology or not? If you don't, stop complaining. Here's an antidepressant. Get out of the way because there's other more urgent people required. So emergency care is one of the most magnificent expressions of that philosophy, where the symptom is the problem. No one has bleeding eye syndrome or missing arm disease. If your arm is severed or dangling off from a car accident, you don't need herbalism. You need the emergency room. And so it's emergency where the symptom is the problem. That is emergency care.
Yeah.
And obviously for people emergency experts on this, like I'm grossly exaggerating, but just to make a philosophical point, just to differentiate from natural medicine is like, okay, how can we get you from chronic to normal and from normal to optimal? Not from emergency to stable. Emergency to stable is emergency Western medicine. But getting from stable to normal, meaning without the need of an exogenous toxin, which is what a pharmaceutical is, it is technically because of the LD50, that's not getting someone to normal. Normal is what were they before the need for an LD50 substance in order to, because that's stabilization. That's normal. That's
Can
not
you
normal.
explain LD50 to the?
So lethal dose 50%, it means that
Yeah.
in order to classify a pharmaceutical for market is you have to figure out the toxic dose in which what is the dosage of the substance that will kill 50% of a rat population in some measure of time. I'm fucking with the rest of
And,
the
and also LD50 was my rapper name.
Nice.
You were slaying that crowd, or at least half of them. 50 would be a really hilarious medical
I did a
rapper.
lot of work in environmental toxicology on the chemicals and especially their impact on fish there, but that's another story.
Okay, that's funny. I trained I trained with a martial artist whose day job was drawing and cataloging all the, I forget the name of the fly. It's like a gaddis fly or something. It was like a
Okay.
very fragile fly in the
Yeah.
natural water springs, and like if those populations drop, that was the big canary in the coal mine. Is that right? Is the gaddis fly?
The caddisfly, I think.
Caddis fly, caddis
yeah.
fly, that's caddis.
Yeah.
It was a caddis fly, and you probably know him. Like he was a famous draw. He's like this world's. There's actually a couple flies named after him. That's a dubious.
I've not met the caddisfly.
You've not met them? Oh,
I
they're
haven't.
great conversationalists. Amazing.
Yeah, a lot of buzz. Yeah, but
So the journey from emergency to stabilization, and then ideally from stabilization to normal, and then from normal to optimal. So natural medicine, functional medicine is helping, and there's this kind of a dogtail on chronic that kind of blends into it. So I'm very clear where my sandbox ends. I should not step foot in the emergency room, but I'm really good at helping the chronic to normal and the normal to optimal. And when I was in graduate school, I went to chiropractic school in Dallas, Texas. This is where humor comes but intersects directly. I would do the annual talent shows, and I would pretend to be Jon Stewart and sit down at a table with my PowerPoint was the little like the window box they have on the Daily
Yes.
Show. It was on the stadium the auditorium's screen thingy.
Yes.
And so I would do the fake clip. Now, this may sound like a brag, but it's actually going to fall flat on its face. I'm technically Jon Stewart's cousin, but we've never met. So my grandfather and his grandmother were siblings, but we've never met. And I got the family tree and everything, and I wish to meet him one day. Hopefully, comedy would be the fastest way to that. But I pretend to be Jon Stewart, and I would roast the school, the faculty, the president of our school, the chiropractic itself. And I did that every year I was in school. And one that I placed in a talent show twice. And what I saw with the humor and I also did every trimester there was a student faculty appreciation where I was a class note taker because years of video games, I learned how to type super fast. And I would keep a file on the professors of all the outlandish things they would say off the cuff. And then I would have a quotable quotes. I would roast the faculty of our trimester and then have a quotable quotes where I throw back all the crazy stuff they said during the school year to the point where in the later trimesters, they would begin to say something, stop mid-sentence and glare at me and try to say, Sam, don't write that down. And I'd just be like, and it became like you could see the professor's self-censor in front of me. But they couldn't, the thing is that they couldn't get angry at me because I was the top student in the class. They knew I wasn't messing around, that I was actually like paying attention, just too much attention. That's
Yeah.
the actual problem.
Awesome.
Putting the observational humor there.
Yeah, exactly. It's observation at their peril. I then went into, once I graduated, I traveled around the states teaching board reviews to other chiropractors so they could pass their national registrations exams. So that was teaching radiology. I was teaching skeletal anatomy, neuroanatomy, biochem, pathology, microbiology, for they could pass their national boards. Humor was important also to keep students engaged. Nothing helps you develop your stage fortitude like trying to keep a bunch of stressed out, sleep deprived, semi hostile chiropractic students engaged for 5 days in a row. That's a crucible. That is a crucible right there.
Yeah.
And then I lived in New Zealand for 8 years, starting in 2010, and opened a physical practice. And their humor was an integral part of engaging with people who were struggling with really serious stuff. I worked with patients over there that were kicked to the curb by both Western and natural medicine. These were typically women age 40 to 59 who had a combination of chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, autoimmunity, one or two of them just for fun, indigestion, other bowel problems, hormone imbalances, and a couple other things. Your hand is defying gravity.
Yes.
Oh, I'm just relating. Just relating. No problem.
Just relating. So, yeah, for those just listening, because obviously you can only listen, just okay, who's just raising your hand. And so that's where I developed my clinical chops and developed my own systems called the 10 Pillars of Health. And then I developed my own model for looking at any addiction, a meta model of working with addiction, including my own, and then got really heavy into functional medicine. And that's where I specialize right now. I left New Zealand to come back to the States in early 2018, and I've been here ever since. And I've been a virtual functional medicine concierge practitioner ever since. I was on Zoom well before it was fashionable. And humor continued to develop for me, especially when I read a 2019, I believe it was a New York Times article on the placebo effect. And now my first bachelor's degree was in psychosomatic medicine, where it was a self-designed major, which is basically glorified pre-med with extra organic chemistry and medical anthropology and philosophy. And I mean, fulfilling all the pre-med requirements plus a bunch extra. So I was deeply interested in the placebo effect. And when I read the article, it said that the placebo effect, technically, how much you like and trust your doctor.
Wow.
Whoa.
That's it.
Ooh.
That's the relevance to TH right there. Probably should have opened with that, but here we are halfway through. So the placebo effect is how much you like and trust your doctor. And when I read this and I audited back through my experience of clinicians and also classmates, and colleagues, it answered a question for me. The question was this: why is it that there's certain clinicians who are profoundly mediocre in clinical work, profoundly mediocre, get disproportionately positive results, while there are practitioners who are blazingly smart, whose protocols practically glow with genius, get less than expected results? And it answered my question, because these blazingly smart practitioners who don't get the results, they all had one thing in common. They had the bedside manners of a doorstop.
Yep.
So it's like Dr. House versus Marcus Wilby, MD.
Exactly. So the profoundly mediocre clinicians, technically, but got disproportionately positive results, they had incredible charisma and bedside manners. And that finally explained it. Because what happens is that if someone is working with a clinician and the patient doesn't like or trust the clinician, any recommendations, whether suggested or if they're even implemented, will hit a cortisol tinged glass ceiling. They will have a stress response because it's been yoked subconsciously or consciously to this either inconsiderate, doorstop, or rude clinician. And that's going to create, like I said, a cortisol tinged glass ceiling. And that's why people have these varying responses, despite the technical skill of the practitioner. And so when I read that article and audited the truth of it back through my own personal experience, I realized that being likable is a clinical imperative. In order to really serve your patients, you must be likable.
Yeah.
It's not an option, it's a requirement. If you want to help them as much as you can, you must be likable. I'm not saying being fake. You're not going to come in there. God, what's the name of that comic with the red hair and the big mallet?
Oh, a Carrot Top or a
Carrot Top.
Gallagher.
Don't look like if you can pull it off, good for you. Not likely. Maybe as a pediatrician, that might work.
Yeah.
But genuinely be likable. So when I read that article and I sat with myself, I was like, okay, if I really care about my patients, which I do, I have to be more likable. So that's when I signed up for a stand-up comedy class and an improv class.
Nice.
You got to
Yeah.
take action. You got to do it. So I did both, and I realized that stand-up was way more my jam. I'd already been doing it. And nothing against improv. Improv is an entire separate discipline that they do cross paths occasionally, but it's a very different skill.
Yeah. Very
So
different. Yeah.
different, very different. In fact, a lot of improvers are terrified of doing stand-up, which you think would be bizarre. And this is not my observation. This is what they told me directly. Because in stand-up, there's no net. There's no someone that can rescue you. You can't say end scene. You can't rely on the other person. And it's just you like being confronted by the audience. Whereas comedians, some comedians really struggle with improv because it is unscripted.
Yeah.
And they can't like rep it out. They can't practice and rehearse and test it. I do think that both would benefit from taking a class or two of the other. Improv would help stand up tremendously handle the multivariant factors that go into going onto a set. The audience is different, the manager is different, the venue can look. I did a 1 hour comedy special called NeuroSpicy Love, Life, and Comedy on the Spectrum, which is available for free on YouTube. Just put in Dr. Sam Shay NeuroSpicy, you'll find it. My opening night, the opening night of the show, I presented this at the Denver Fringe Festival back in June of 24. Like the opening night, I walk out, I pick up the mic to do my opening joke, and the joint attachment cord to the mic fell out.
Perfect.
Before I could even finish the first joke, the cord fell out and slammed on the stage. Now, if I had not had improv, I would have panicked and lost like my whole rhythm. And instead, without missing a beat, I turn to the audience and say, well, that was a good omen. And while they're laughing, I just pick it up, plug it back in, put the stand away, and just go right into my thing. That's the value of improv for stand-up. You have no idea what's going to happen if members of the audience are drunk, or if they're just annoyed, or if they're heckling, or if the mic breaks, or if the lighting is whatever, or the host is. You've no idea. So that improv can help stand-ups that way. Stand-up can help improv by also improv can help stand-up with idea generation, with ideation. Improv is absolutely wonderful to help with idea. In fact, that's where improv came from. I think the lore is it was developed as a way to try to figure out ideas for sketch comedy. Then it became its own discipline. I think that's the way it is. There's a wonderful audiobook. It's on Audible only by Keegan-Michael Key on the history of sketch comedy. I recall it's like an 11-part series. It is a gold mine.
Wow.
That is one of the most valuable historical perspectives on comedy I think that's ever been done. And then stand-up can help improv get way more confident on stage. Way more confident, and also become much more concise with their writing. Because if anyone does stand-up like less is more, he says as he's been monologuing forever, how long at the point. And so I got into stand-up, and I've been doing stand-up ever since. And this was since 2019. So I did do one stand-up class when I was in New Zealand, 2017, but I didn't take it seriously till I read that article. And then I now do this consistently. When I wrote my first 60-minute show, I've got 3 more shows in me, one on addiction, one on getting out of a cult that I was a part of for 10 years, and one on my health journey. And the comedy has become a way of not only connecting with my clients and patients, but it's helped me become a better speaker, a better writer, and a better thinker. And comedy is a way to distill down the most important things into something that's palatable and relatable, which is exactly what a good clinician should do.
I had an urge to say something because I'm a circus person.
Uh-huh.
Functional medicine saved my life multiple times while my back would go out in the middle of circus school. And I look for functional physicians because, hello, we're supposed to be able to bend and move when we turn 80. And the only way to do that is to pay attention to what is functional. And being functional means having a functional rapport with your people, which is where I'm circling back around to what you said.
Absolutely. Here's how I would define functional medicine for people. It's leveraging the best of Western medicine diagnostics with the best of natural medicine, lifestyle, diet, nutrition interventions. That's functional medicine. And going back to that philosophical difference, Western medicine is black and white and again, I'm exaggerating. I get it. So I'll ask for forgiveness later. But it's the on-off detection of pathology. Do you have it or do you not? Functional medicine, that's black and white. Functional medicine is that massive gray space in between.
No.
Now, that's how I understand who's in what side of the sandbox. And I think that regardless of what sandbox part of the sandbox you're stepping in, that sounds like something in dog poop. Where you're side of the sandbox, maybe if you're a proctologist or really it's the metaphor fit, but whatever. The being likable as a clinician is a clinical imperative. And if you want some strategies around it, I gave a 5-minute talk at a conference in, I think it was October of 23, where I was talking about 300 functional medicine, mostly functional medicine doctors, about 300 people in the room. And it was 5 minutes on how to add more humor to your practice. And I came up with the 3 steps, the ABCs. A, aim for truth. Never try to find the truth in the funny. Try to find the funny in the truth. When you are writing humor, never aim for funny, aim for truth. And you'll see that the things that you laugh the hardest in a comedy show, you laugh because they're not funny, that they're true and presented in a funny way.
Yeah.
But it's always the truth. The B stands for be vulnerable. So the best type of humor is relatable. And I'm transparent with my clients. I don't go into gratuitous details or whatever. It's just I'm showing some humanity here. I'm okay sharing slightly my process. I don't make the sessions about me. It's to show that there's the era of the 1950s doctor as God era is long dead. And where being vulnerable is the fastest way to build rapport. So your clients know, trust, develop the placebo effect. And I'm not being vulnerable to contrive something. It's just shedding a layer of formality. Then the C in the ABC, aim for truth, be vulnerable. And then C is commit to warmth. And the reason why I say commit to warmth is because comedy is a blood sport. And you risk offending people by daring to be funny. And comedy requires attunement. In fact, if anyone's ever done stand-up comedy, 30 to 50% of what you're doing on stage is not talking, it's listening to the audience. You're reading them. And until you've had that experience, and anyone who's done lectures, it's similar. It's a similar experience. Not identical, it's similar. And you've got to read the room. So some patients, they have nothing to do with humor. They want the facts, they want to get in and get out. They may think that humor, you're trivializing their experience. And you don't want to do that. You want to read the room. Again, another comedy term. And commit to warmth, meaning that you be humorous in a way that's a goodwill. You're not making a joke for the sake of a chuckle, which can be cheap humor involving body fluids, bad relationships, and other cheap tropes that are not really going to be effective. So that's how I would say, like, practically for practitioners to increase their ability to connect with clients and patients through humor.
This is amazing. There's a study that was done of Canadian medical students. They took some of the medical students and they put them through an improv class. The rest of the class was the control. They just did their studies. After they did their internship, whatever, they were evaluated. The group that had been through the improv training, they were considered more relatable and better listeners and better practitioners than the control group. And it's, that that training to be able to adapt to situation, be able to, yeah, and it literally could save someone's life, which is
Totally.
the other
Absolutely.
thing. Have you read Del Close's Truth and Comedy?
Not yet.
Okay, all right. I don't think you'll be surprised at it because it's basically truth is comedy, and that comedy is more effective when it's, you can tell when somebody's faking empathy or whatnot, but when someone's bringing their own experience to a presentation and it's real, much more impactful. And just apply that to comedy.
Totally. And the truth, the reason why I made, then the Asperger's stuff comes in later. I only found out I had Asperger's in, really, it was 2019. And
Okay, so you're already a practicing doctor. You've already had how many years in this field at that time?
I graduated in early 2008. So
Okay.
it did 10 years at that point. And
Wow.
and I've always been different, and I'm not going to take credit for this joke. I just heard it recently, but the joke is even though I wasn't diagnosed with being on the spectrum, I was peer reviewed.
Right.
And,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so
but
what made you look into it?
my father, because I realized he was severe Asperger's. And then I just naturally looked at myself being the branch off the tree. And then once I dug into it, I was like, wow, that uncomfortably fits. And then I went and read and did all the research and figured it out. And I was like, wow, this really matches. And then I read, include everything on the hearing sensitivity. Like in my 60-minute show, I have 3 minutes or 5% of the whole show. It's a very Aspie thing to say. 3 minutes, 60 minutes, 5%. According to the ratio, carry the two, whatever. 5% of my show is just devoted to hearing sensitivity, which is my personal kryptonite. And what I realized about having Asperger's is that it's a package deal. So the elephantine memory and the sensory sensitivities are actually one and the same.
Okay, I need to know what elephantine memory is.
A memory of an elephant. It's a phrase for having a memory of an elephant.
Checking in on it. Thank you.
Okay. Great Scrabble word, elephantine. There's a phrase called signal to noise ratio, where something you filter out the noise and you pick up the signal. Problem of having Asperger's is that there is no noise; it's all signal.
Yeah.
So there's no innate filtering software that I was programmed with. So all sounds are over everything. The apertures of sense perception are dilated way open. And so that's why lights are too bright, sounds are too loud, smells are strong, texture's intense, taste is really strong. It's all this, the data just keeps coming in, and everything is interpreted as significant, which is why there's such a strong memory, but there's such an ease to experience, there's such a swift on-ramp to be overwhelmed. And the other thing is that there's a constant literalism because there's no social software. Everything is viewed as significant and of equal importance. That's why I took everything and take everything so literally. Now, it's taken me several decades of coaching, body work, functional medicine, and study for me to effectively navigate the normie world to the point where a lot of people don't even know I'm on the spectrum unless they're trained to spot it. And that's because I've learned how to I've learned social etiquette not through instinct but through algorithms.
Yeah,
And
I learned
there's
it
a
through
lot of
street
algorithms.
performing.
Yeah, street performing. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. One of my dearest friends on the planet, we're in communication almost daily, dearest friends, she grew up in Hell's Kitchen as a teenager, and she emancipated herself from her parents as a teenager to live on the streets of Hell's Kitchen to escape her unmedicated schizophrenic father.
Wow.
And
Wow.
if you ever want to meet someone that is one of the most astute readers of emotional intelligence, it's her. Because to navigate as a female teenager on Hell's Kitchen in the 90s, that's not a training you can sign up for.
No.
So the ability to layer one's social software, she's not on the spectrum, but just anyone can learn. She had probably the most extreme case I've seen.
And some complex PTSD, which can mimic some of the same symptoms.
Correct. And ironically enough, my father, Dr. Jonathan Shay, defined the term moral injury. He wrote 2 books,
Oh.
Moral Injury and
Wow.
PTSD. And the irony is that in the name of defining and disseminating the term moral injury in the world, he caused moral injury in his son. And if you want some more detail on that, I can't make this up. That's why it's funny and tragic, which most real comedy is tragic in some sense. I talk about him for a good chunk in the comedy special. The thing about doing a comedy special, particularly on one topic, now I'm very proud of my comedy special, not because I wrote it. Oh my God, amazing. No, it's that the comedy special was designed to bring people together. Normies, air quotes, neurotypicals, to bring normies and people on the spectrum together. A lot of spectrum comics, not all, a lot lean on, I'm going to either dunk on normies or I'm going to self-immolate. And I don't like that. I don't like it. Now, some of their jokes are funny, but not sure if it helps. So I designed this show with no cursing, no politics, no body fluid jokes, no standard tropes that comedians lean on. Now, some of them are brilliant at that. That's their whole gig, and you can get a hernia laughing so hard. But I designed the show specifically to have no more easily offensive tools to crack a joke. I also wrote it in a way that's understandable to bring people together, and that it has narrative consistency on one topic that actually has a story arc to it. And I've been told that's some of the hardest comedy to write when you combine all of those things together. And it's still funny. I got over 40 5-star reviews and I got a trailer that I got that shows over 45-star reviews from my show at the Denver Fringe. And it has an actual meaning at the end and something practical to do, that there is an actual walk away message for people to know how to better interact with one another at the end that wraps everything together in a really nice bow. And that's the goal of my comedy. My comedy is not only to be funny, but it's actually advocacy. And that comedy is not just stress. It cannot just be stress relief and and a tool for social cohesion, but it actually could be advocacy. And you actually see this more and more today, ever since John Mulaney did an entire special on, I think it's called Baby J. He did a recent special on what it was like to have an intervention and be put into rehab. Taylor Tomlinson, one of the funniest people I know, I don't know her personally, but one of the funniest comics I've seen, she talks about what it's like to be bipolar. And because today, in at least stand-up comedy, it's never been a better or a worse time to be a comic. It's never been better because there's no more cutthroat competition like there was in the 70s, 80s, and 90s when everyone was competing for that one spot on Johnny Carson, the 7 to 7:30 slot on NBC, or the precious few traveling comedy things there were available, and everyone was vicious and attacking one another. But today everyone's got a YouTube channel, everyone's got a podcast. There's Netflix has an unlimited supply of spots. Same thing with Hulu, same thing with HBO, same thing with Amazon Prime. There's no more competition for space. That's gone. So now the comics are incentivized to help each other because now we can all help each other get on each other's podcasts, and because you can only, like, very few people can make more than one special a year. George Carlin at his peak was able to do one special a year. Only Chappelle can do 3 new specials a year. Unceasingly. That's so rare. So when you've got a 1-year lag time minimum, you help each other. So it's never been a better time. And plus there's all these books, there's conferences like the ATH, there's trainings, there's coaching, there's group writing, you can do Zoom. Like it's never been better. Tons of open mics. It's never been worse because certain very loud percentages of the audience are so sensitive, and there's a perverse incentive to destroy someone's career and their credibility because of the clickbait nonsense on social media. And so now you've got a situation where the audience can be genuinely your enemy, where they're not there to have fun, they're there to get street cred by destroying you or releasing your jokes that aren't fully cooked yet. So this is why you have a lot of higher end clubs ban all cell phones and put them in the little lock pouches or whatever they're called, so that you cannot record. And if you're recorded, you're in deep trouble as someone recording a comic without their permission. So it's a very, and also politically, and I'm not going to talk about any politics specifically, but one of the most glaring canaries in the coal mine is if the comics are being shut down.
Yep.
Yeah.
And comedy is very dangerous in certain ways. And I just listened to a podcast yesterday about how, look, Lenny Bruce preceded Richard Pryor by about 10 years.
Yes.
Most people know Richard Pryor, and they should. We owe a lot to Richard Pryor. That man, I mean, it's like the greats. He's just one of the greats in terms of being able to push the profession forward into the. But Lenny Bruce preceded him by about a decade.
Yeah.
And we would not have free speech as it is without Lenny Bruce. And most people don't realize that.
100%
I mean,
agree.
you could be arrested for using the word schmuck. Arrested.
Yeah.
Arrested in the United States. Arrested.
He was arrested, wasn't he?
And that's why I said it.
Numerous times in New York City and Chicago.
So I don't think people truly appreciate what comedians have done for individual liberty and freedom. And Lenny, look, I wish I could have met him, but like there's some people out there that change the course of history, and Lenny is one of them, a comedian. Jon Stewart, I don't say this out of blood piety that I'm related to him. I didn't even know I was related to him for years and years, but he is one of the comedians that legitimized comedy as a vector of news.
Yeah.
And we can all name a dozen people that did their own respective things. I'm using the intersection of comedy, medicine, and being on the spectrum has all converged. And what I want to do at the conference is not only going to perform my full show so that everyone will see a live performance of my 60-minute show, but the breakout session is going to be discussing in detail how to, one, become more relatable through humor in your practice. And I'll go into much more details on the ABC, aim for truth, be vulnerable, and commit to warmth. But I'll also talk about how do you relate to someone on the spectrum that's your patient or client. Now, they'll have a much better background on what that is because they'll have seen the show first.
Yeah.
And they'll have a much better understanding of what that's about. But there are very specific strategies on how to relate to someone who's on the spectrum. And a lot of it has to do with be very careful with your words and that you keep that you're unambiguous with your word use, and just know that anything that you say can be taken quite literally and can have can mainline directly into someone's brainstem and without a lot of filtration. And there's also things around social distance, and I'm not talking about contagion. I'm talking about how you present yourself under some of the social niceties may backfire. And there's certain ways to interact with certain people on the spectrum that really the word is attunement, is just how to be more attuned with the person that's in front of you.
And as the grandfather of an autistic child, I'd like to learn more about how to interact and what I may do. But that's a whole nother show. We're AATH, we're about therapeutic humor, we're about using humor to make medicine more effective, to make teaching more effective, to make organizations more effective, to make individuals more effective. Okay. You're using humor in a groundbreaking way, life-saving way. The question is, someone's facing an issue on any day, any given day, any Thursday. What should they know?
A personal responsibility for your health. That would be the number one thing, and have it be data driven. And when I was much younger, I handed over authority to too many people too often, and without taking personal responsibility and personal agency in my health outcomes. And to be this in extreme, my grandfather died from a medical misadventure because there wasn't enough. He didn't research out the risks properly, which is tragic and ironic at best. And I'd say that take personal responsibility and find a data-driven methodology. So I'm a huge fan of testing. That's what functional testing is. And to me, the most valuable form and platform for personal responsibility is to do functional genetics. And the reason I say that explicitly functional genetics, not a functional gut test, not a functional mitochondria, which are great. I do those too. But in terms of value, you only need to do one significant functional genetics test once, and then you have the data for life. The value of the data does not decay over time like any blood test that's not a genetics test, any stool test looking for infections or whatever. And like those things drop off in value after 3, 6, 9, 12 months.
Yeah.
Genetics is one investment, and the dividends continue to serve for decades. And I firmly believe that the single most valuable investment in someone's health journey and for the personal agency is to get functional genetics tested for themselves. And if they're a practitioner or a clinician, be able to supply that to your clients and patients. And yeah.
So that would be like having a roadmap going in and saying, okay, here's some symptoms, but the genetic testing would say, yeah, these symptoms are related to these. Yeah.
So there's risk factors. So genes will tell you how to live optimally and where the fault lines are in where the risk factors are. And for example, you can determine, it's not going to tell you what your level of amino acids are now, what your thyroid levels are now, what your vitamin levels are now. That's functional testing. Genetics is giving you the filter in which all functional tests, all these metabolites and thoughts and physical inputs and neurological inputs have to be filtered through. And right now, functional genetics can tell you what your optimal diet is. Are you keto, paleo, Mediterranean, or high carb? What your hardwired sugar foods are. Whether you're like caffeine, you have the risk of caffeine-induced anxiety and depression, like I do. Like I have big red dots in my caffeine genes, or I can't be doing caffeine or make me an anxious, depressed mess. It can tell you about eating behaviors, like people's aversion to bitter, or don't mind bitter, which may seem trivial, but if you're averse to the flavor of bitter, that means you eat somewhere between 100-ish pounds fewer of bitter vegetables a year. So if you know that, then you can know how to prep those bitter vegetables in a way to make them less bitter so you'll consume them, as one example. Your genetic relationship to inflammation, to scavenging free radicals in the mitochondria, and looking at your relationship to absorbing and using vitamin D, which is one of the most important nutrients in the body. Like getting vitamin D from sunlight into your bloodstream is half the battle. Getting it from the bloodstream into the cells is a completely other genetic issue. And for those of you who don't fully realize it, vitamin D controls estimated between 3 to 5% of your entire human genome. That's a lot. Most of it related to inflammation and immunity. Yes, there's some bone density stuff. Hooray. It's mostly around inflammation and immune function modulation.
Affects depression, affects anxiety, affects all the other stuff too.
Totally.
Dr. Sam, where do we find you on the interweb? And
I'm easy to find, just drsamshay.com, drsamshay.com. You can also put Dr. Sam Shay into YouTube. You can put it into any podcast player. I've been on so many podcasts and summits and whatnot. My YouTube channel has playlists on my stand-up comedy, on functional genetics, on functional testing, on addiction, it's got a lot of stuff there, and I'm pretty easy to find.
Yeah, and to the listening audience, that when you do search Dr. Sam Shay and you get a functional medicine website, that's the right place to be. You're at the right person. Because I went searching for comedian because I was not sure I was in the right place.
What happened at the very beginning of my career, when someone put in Sam Shay into the search engine, a porn star would come up, and that led to some awkward phone calls at the clinic. But fortunately, my name has jumped to the search results a bit.
That's a different type of functional. We'll go for that.
Yeah, no.
For sure. This has been fabulous. Tons of amazing information right around my heart is aligned. I love the idea of functional medicine and being functional as we age and all of that. And thank you for meeting with us.
You're very welcome. And I look forward to meeting you all at the conference. And I encourage people to come to the conference. It's going to be a fun one. And this is going to be my first time at the conference, so I don't know how many times there's been like a professional comedian who's also a clinician, like actually performing their stuff there. But one of my dreams is to educate the gatekeepers of people's health Because when I was younger, there is at best ignorance, at worst there was gaslighting about my different behavior patterns. And I really want to educate clinicians, teachers, principals, therapists, doctors on a wider scale, like at conferences like this, state and national association meetings, other clinical conferences, and so on, because I really want to educate at scale the very thing that I didn't have 30 years ago that I wish I did. So this is, we're talking about healing. The way you know you've truly healed from something is that when one has developed enough resource and resilience to be able to prevent, mitigate, or reverse the very thing that caused them harm, but do it at scale. And to me, that's why I use comedy as my advocacy, because that's how I know I've truly arrived and healed, is that I'm able to help solve this issue at scale for others.
Love
And
it.
working with the gatekeepers is the fastest way I know how to do that.
Beautiful.
That's fantastic. This has been Laughbox, the official podcast of the Association for Applied and Therapeutic Humor. We want to thank our special guest, Dr. Sam Shay, who'll be speaking at the AATH conference in Charlotte this May. You've got to come. You've got to hear this man. All right. So I'm Jim Bob Williams.
And I'm Katie B. Thank you very much, Sam. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you both. Really appreciate you.
Phenomenal. Laughbox is a production of the Association for Applied and Therapeutic Humor. Visit us online at www.aath.org. Follow us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or LinkedIn. Music by Gary Rubio. For more information, www.garyrubiomusic.com.